Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible game from the Superbet Chess Classic. This is round 5 and it's Bogdan-Daniel Deac versus Alireza Firouzja. Deac being the local hero. If you remember from the previous video where we covered his game, I mentioned that he went undefeated in the 2021 edition of the FIDE Grand Swiss, where he got 6 draws and 3 victories against very, very strong opponents. And so far, he played 4 games in this impressive tournament and he got draws against Nepo, Aronian, and Mamedjarov, and he defeated Raport in that game that we've covered, and now he faces Alireza. So Deac has the white pieces. It's quite the game. Let's check it out. So here we have d4, knight to f6 by Alireza, c4, g6, going for the king's Indian defense, knight to c3, bishop to g7, and e4 now. So this is the standard stuff. d6 with bishop to e2, Alireza castles, and now there are a couple of very popular options here. For example, knight to f3 and bishop to g5 are the absolute top moves that are being played here. You can also play f4, which is somewhat rarer. You can play g4, which is very rare, and you can play h4, which is extremely rare. And that's exactly what Deac plays. And he says, "I'm not afraid of you." He is lower rated than most of these players, but not by much. He's like 2675, I believe, but I'm gonna check. I don't want to trick you guys. Yeah, officially he's 2671 before he started this tournament. So it does make sense to go aggressive against these top players. If he wins, that's a lot of points. Plus, if you lose, I mean, yeah, you only lose a little, but you didn't really have fun. So here h4, he wants to go right for the black king, and now here the usual reply here is c5. Even though this is very rare, I guess c5 is considered the absolute strongest. Alireza goes for knight to c6, and okay, this puts pressure on white center. Invites d5, now challenges the knight here, knight to e5, and now h5. So what's happening here? Of course, we want to advance the pawn all the way and then put pressure on black's dark squares around the king. We have c6. Alireza responds to this aggression on the king side in a very principled manner. He wants the counterattack in the center. We often say when you're attacked on the king side or queen side, you should counterattack in the center of the board. That's how chess works. And here, h6. Knight to f3 is a known move here, but h6 right away is a new one. So already as of move 9, we have a completely new game. Let's see how Alireza handles this pressure. Of course, bishop to h8, this is the only move. Knight to f3 now, and now not capturing, but rather knight e to g4. You could just capture, for example, captures, bishop d7, you continue development, but Alireza wants to play a fun game. So knight e to g4, putting pressure on the f2 pawn. Now queen to b6 could be a very unpleasant move. We have castles, and now queen to b6. And now, what do you play here? This isn't all that great for black, but it's hard to realize why. And here, after some consideration, Deac played queen to b3. The probably strongest is knight to a4 or even a4, preparing a5, then proving that the black queen does not belong on b6. And after a5, we can play knight to e1, attacking the knight here. And after the knight moves, now we play bishop to e3. We attack the queen, and now probably you have to move the queen back, and white retains a better position, because if you grab the b2 pawn, then we have a lot of fun here. Rook to c1, and we will trap the queen. It seems very unlikely, but it's true. How do you save the queen? None of these squares are available to the queen. And after something like knight e to g4, going after the bishop to d4 now. Preparing all sorts of nasty discoveries. We're going to play c5 now, attacking the bishop, and after rook to b1, there really aren't all that many great moves here. You're going to have to capture the rook here, because if you play queen to a3, we're going to play knight to b5 now, attack the queen, and after queen to a2, now comes rook b2, and that's it. No more squares for the black queen. So queen to b6 is questionable, but it requires, if you don't know this by heart, you're not gonna find this. So here, queen to b3 and knight to h5 now, opening up the dark square bishop's diagonal here. We have knight to h2. Neither player wants to, of course, capture, because if you capture here, then you allow black to open up the A file for the rook, and of course, if Alireza captures, then of course Deac will open the A file for his rook. So here, knight to H2, offering a trade here, and you could play something like knight captures, king captures. Then, of course, you don't want to allow bishop captures knight. We're going to bring the knight back, something like bishop to G5. Of course, you could play it like this, but Alireza just goes back, knight H to F6. We have knight back to F3, and now knight to D7, shifting this knight over to E5. We have queen to C2, and the knight might also come to C5. This will come with tempo then on the queen here. So knight to C5, putting pressure on the E4 pawn, but okay, the pawn is sufficiently defended, but white cannot play B4 to kick away this knight from C5. The queen prevents this. Bishop to F4, and now we have A5, so you don't have to worry about B4 anytime soon. Rook A to E1, and now Alireza opens up the position with F5. We have E captures, rook captures, and now bishop to G5, putting pressure on this E7 pawn. So queen back to D8, and now comes queen to D2. Interestingly, a bishop to D3, although it looks incredibly impressive, attacks the rook and also the E7 pawn. It's not all that impressive. We're just going to play knight captures on D3, and now what do you play? The problem is you have to play queen captures on D3, and that's why it's not all that scary. If you had bishop captures on E7, it'd be great, but there's knight captures on E1. A nice in-between move going after the queen here, and after rook captures, we're going to play queen to D7, and not much to show for. Black is just completely winning here. So after queen to D8, queen to D2, and now we have queen to F8, putting more pressure along the F file. Bishop to D1, now finally going after that E7 pawn, and rook to F7. Alireza has to defend it, and now comes pawn to B3. And here, interestingly, knight to E4 is incredibly strong for white. To give you an example, knight captures on E4, rook captures on E4, and now what can black play here? Well, black could go for something like, let's say, bishop to F5. We're going to attack the rook, and after the knight moves, what does black do next? It's just very, very tricky. We're going to play rook to E1. We're going to put pressure on the E7 pawn, and that is a backwards pawn. You're not going to be able to advance it, so it's going to be very, very hard for black to withstand this. However, after rook to F7, B3 was played, and now we have knight captures on H6. Idea being, of course, that if bishop captures on H6, we're going to play bishop captures on C3, attack the axe queen, and after queen to E3, or if you capture, of course, queen captures on H6, but probably queen to E3, and now bishop back to G7, and Alireza is very happy now. But instead, we have D captures on C6, B captures on C6, and now comes knight to D4. Again, this knight being here is just super annoying. As long as this is here, we're never really threatening to pick up the knight on H6. So here, knight to A4 would be the way to go. Now we are threatening bishop captures on H6, and after knight G4, we can just double black's pawns here, and this will be, of course, very good for white. For some reason, Alireza Deac doesn't like this. Here we have knight to D4, putting pressure on the C6 pawn, and here I think Alireza was very happy that he gets a little breathing room here, and he goes knight to F5, puts pressure on the knight here, and he allows, of course, Deac to capture on C6, and he does. He plays knight captures on C6. Here, knight captures on F5 was probably more precise. After bishop captures, bishop F3. Now we go after the C6 pawn. Maybe better do it like this. But in the game, knight captures on C6 was played, and now Alireza plays bishop to B7. He gets grabs hold of this long diagonal, bishop to F3, and now comes rook to A6 by Alireza. And this is the first moment where Alireza could really have seized the initiative, but it's a very tricky move to find. The idea here in the position is that H6 will win you the game, but I mean, not something you would see. Point is that once the bishop moves back, bishop to E3, we're going to play queen to C8, attack the knight here, and now after knight to D4, we're going to play bishop captures on D4, bishop captures on D4, bishop captures on F3, and after G captures, knight to H4, and Alireza has a winning attack here. The rook and the knight are attacking F3, queen can come to H3. This is just unstoppable. So probably after this H6 move, you can't really even go back with the bishop, but none of the other options are any better. I mean, you can play knight captures on e7 with check. We're gonna play knight captures, bishop captures on e7, rook captures, and black is just better here. Rook captures, queen captures. We can even trade everything. Queen captures, bishop captures, queen captures, and now you get this position where Alireza is just up a piece. So of course, not a lot of fun for white. Alireza played rook to a6 instead. He went for the knight here, and now we have knight captures on e7 with check. Knight captures on e7, bishop captures on b7, bishop captures on c3. We have queen captures and knight captures on b7. So a nice capture fest here at move 29, and there's still material advantage here. You can see that Alireza is up a piece, but it's not as clear a game as the one that we've shown. So here, rook e2, adding more defense here to the f2 pawn, h6 now, and a bishop all the way back to c1. We have rook to a8, and now comes bishop to b2, threatening queen to h8 checkmate. So king to h7, the queen now guards the h8 square, rook f to e1. Now we double up here, knight to c5, and queen to d2. Here we have knight to f5 and queen to d5. So now you can see that it's not easy, and Alireza is much better. So here we have h5, bishop to c3, and now knight to d7. We have rook to e6, putting a lot of pressure here, but rook to c8. And now we have bishop captures on a5. Deac says, all right, I've calculated something very unpleasant for you. Do you have an answer here? Because if not, I have a passed a pawn, I have a passed b pawn. Those, as you know, are incredibly fast. However, Alireza's position is completely winning here. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the only winning move for Alireza while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on realizing that the rook to c5 wins the game, even though it's not all that easy to calculate. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, of course, it's rook to c5. Alireza did not play this, but we will show why it's super strong. So, of course, you are attacking the queen and the bishop, and if the queen moves, we're going to win the bishop, unless you play queen to d2. So this is one thing to consider. The other thing you have to consider if you play rook to c5 is what happens if rook to e8 is just a very nasty idea, but it's not a problem. We're just gonna play rook captures on d5 here, and after rook captures on f8, we're gonna play rook captures on f8, c captures on d5, and now rook to a8. Let's say we go after the bishop. If the bishop moves, we pick up the pawn, and if b4, okay, we just continue playing this, but black is completely winning here. There's no discussion here. The other thing, and why I think Alireza decided to go not to go for this, is queen to d2. We simply defend the bishop, but now Alireza missed knight to e5, and this now traps the rook. There's no way for the rook to be saved. Queen to c8 will pick up the rook, but I think Alireza saw even this. It's what comes next that he missed, and this is the real shocking one. Bishop to c3, we're gonna play queen to c8. Of course, we go after the rook, and now bishop captures on e5. Queen captures on e6, and now bishop to d4. Now you see that the rook is attacked, so we're going to win back material, and the queen is attacked, but here comes the move. Queen captures on e1 with check. That's the good stuff. Queen captures on e1, and of course knight captures on d4, and now the knight and two rooks will of course defeat the lone white queen. Even with the passed a and b pawn, it's just a completely winning position for black. So very tough for Alireza that he missed this, but he had only 30 seconds on the clock, and he still needs to make 2 more moves to reach time control. So you have to reach move 40 in classical chess, or from tournament to tournament. But I think in FIDE regulated tournaments, it is always move 40 to be granted additional time. So he did not have that time to calculate. He played knight to f6, attacked the queen. Now comes queen to d2, and now it is much easier for white to play. We have rook to e8, offering some trades, bishop back to c3, and now rook captures on e6. We have rook captures and knight to d7 now. So Alireza can still put some pressure, but it's not as clear as it was a moment ago. So here, queen to g5. Deac goes after that g6 pawn. Alireza defends it with queen to g8. Now comes g4. H captures on g4. Queen captures, and now knight to e5, attacking the queen. Queen h3 check, and now knight to h6. You have to play this move because if you move the king, let's say king g7, then we play rook to d6, and that's it. How are you defending this knight? The king is on g7. If queen to e8, we just attack it again, rook d5. And if rook to e7, now of course just bishop captures on e5, rook captures, and queen to c3. Again, how do you defend? King to f6, now comes f4, and that's it. White of course completely winning here. So after queen to h3 check, knight to h6, Alireza has to go for this. Now comes rook captures on d6, and now Deac has 3 connected pass pawns on the queen side. Does this change the game character? Maybe a little bit, but we'll see. We have queen to e8, defending the knight here, and queen to e6 now, offering a queen trade, but also putting more pressure on the knight on e5. Rook to e7 defending, queen to d5, and now knight e back to f7. We have rook to f6. And now comes rook to d7, attacking the queen, queen to e6, and now rook to d1 with check, king g2. And here Alireza, after considering the position for a while, decided to trade queens, because after queen a6 check, queen c6 just blocks check, and that's not a lot of fun. You now have to trade here, because if you capture on a2, of course, then well, there's a lot that we can play, but well, even rook captures on f7 is possible, followed by queen to f3. Let's say captures with check, captures queen to f3, attacks the knight, attacks the rook here, you fall apart. So queen captures on e6 was played. We have rook captures on e6, and now knight to f5. And now we have this endgame where Alireza is up a piece, but it's 3 connected pass pawns. So rook to e1, immediately going for the trade. Alireza declines. Rook d3, we have rook to c1 defending, and knight to g5 now. So 2 knights and the rook so close to the white king. Good things might happen for Alireza, but neither of them are good on time. Alireza has some 3 minutes on the clock. Deac has some 5 minutes on the clock. So king f1, knight to e6, and now comes bishop to e5. Rook to d2, going after the pawn here, and now b4. Deac starts pushing the pawn and gives up the a2 pawn because there's no good way to defend the pawn, actually. For example, rook to a1, we're just going to play knight c5, and you can never push this pawn because the b3 pawn hangs. You can never, I mean, it's it will be impossible to push the pawns. If you play something like b4, then we play knight to d3, attacking the bishop, attacking the f2 pawn, and that's a lot of trouble. So instead, b4, Deac starts pushing those pawns. Rook captures on a2, now comes c5, rook to a4, and c6. So we're going to give up the 2 pawns to advance the past c pawn. Rook captures on b4, c7, knight captures. Alireza has to give up the knight to prevent the pawn from reaching the promotion, the promotion square. Rook captures with check, king went to g8, and now comes bishop back to g3. And now, after all is said and done, you can see that it's equal material, and there is not much either player can do about this. Rook to a4 was played, king g2, we have rook to b4, and now rook to a7. We have rook to c4, king to f8, now comes rook to b7, and the players start repeating. King f8, rook to a7, king to g8, we have rook to b7, king to b8, king to f8, and rook to a7. And it was in this position on move 68 that Bogdan-Daniel, Deac, and Alireza Firouzja agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. So crazy game. Deac really went for Alireza's king already very early on. You can see that the pawn is already on h6 on move 9. Very interesting stuff. Alireza had a few moments where he could have won the game. That h6 move, okay, no one really can calculate that. It was an incredible game, but for someone who came to this tournament as a 2800, great things are expected of them. And also that rook to c5 move, that was Alireza of course would have no problem calculating that if he had more time on the clock. He had 30 seconds when it happened, and that's basically the story of this game. So great stuff by Bogdan here, really representing Romania well, not allowing anyone to take a point away from him. Just brilliant brilliant stuff. So he faced 5 incredibly strong players for draws of 1 victory. I think that he already won like 15 rating points. That's incredible stuff. So we'll see what happens. Tomorrow is a rest day, so no chess tomorrow. Of course, we will cover at least two games, I would say. One from today, maybe one from yesterday, as I didn't cover all that many of them. So we'll see. You can always use hashtag suggestion to suggest one of your favorites. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Long Thing Wrong Thing, Derek King, Jason Salaya, Claudio Brovelli, and Alessandro Bossi, and Yogesh Patki donating because this is the strongest move for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this wonderful event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.